Everyone loves to debate whether or not they should win it, but we are going to rank them, the non-quarterback MVPs, with Austin Gayle of The Ringer.
This is Renner Ranks, the ultimate NFL ranking show. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into today's episode of Renner Ranks, your go-to daily ranks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And a special shout out to all the everydayers out there for making Renner Ranks your first listen. Don't forget to subscribe, like, follow for free on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I, of course, am your host, Mike Renner, NFL draft analyst over at The Messenger. Today's podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedinjobs.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, we're doing non-quarterback MVPs so far this season. Everyone is debating whether or not Tyreek Hill should be eligible for the award. I think by definition, when they named the award value, they screwed every other position outside of the quarterback position in today's modern NFL. That's just a fact. They didn't name the most outstanding player. If they did, we could give it to anyone on the football field. We could give it to kickers, long snappers even, if we wanted to. But alas, value implies, well, quarterback when passing is the far most important thing that occurs on a football field nowadays. So I had Austin Gayle on to rank him. So let's get into it. All right, AG, we are talking non-quarterback MVPs. And I think we all know who number one is in this. That one's been debated whether he should win MVP or not. But I want to talk about this because MVP always is a quarterback award. And there needs to be some other recognition of who's bringing value to the table. Not necessarily, player of the year on one side of the ball, but actually like their impact on games, because player of the year is usually just stats based. But I want guys who are actually impacting the games the most. So we'll start with you. Doing the top three here. Who's your number three?
Jim, before I get into my top three, I do want to add that Danny Heifetz, a writer here at The Ringer, wrote a really good piece on how valuable Brock Purdy is to his team and factored in the fact that he makes no money, and that allows them to pay, George Kittle, Brandon Aiyuk down the road, hopefully, and then Deebo Samuel, one of the better contracts, Trent Williams, Fred Warner, Christian McCaffrey. Like, it gives them that opportunity, and like that in of itself, because like he's literally super valuable and makes like a tenth of what a Dak Prescott makes is interesting. And in that article, he made a note of, since 1996, the MVP award has gone to a player or a quarterback that has won at least 12 games or earned a first-round bye. Or every quarterback that has won the MVP award has won at least 12 games or earned a first-round bye. Like, it's just become like, who's the best quarterback on the best team? It's so much what it's been. Obviously, AP won that crazy year. There's like some recency bias to this award too. Like, the success you have in December or early January can oftentimes lead you to, propel over, some other candidates down the stretch. It's a weird award. It's a very weird award. And I think as the award recently, last year, it changed to where you don't just put in one name, but you rank a series of names. It didn't really matter last year because Mahomes was so obviously the MVP. But this year will be one where it's like, oh my gosh, like, where are people putting their second and third place votes, and how does that affect who ultimately wins? So it will be an interesting race. My number three, though, and I tried to get wacky with it because I think we both know that it's going to go to a quarterback. I tried to really sit and say, like, if I couldn't give it to a quarterback, who would I honestly give it to? And I did kind of take the lens of, like, who are some of the best teams in the NFL and why are they winning? So my number three is Jason Kelce, and it's tied to the tush push. Does the tush push have the same success without Jason Kelce? And, there have been articles written about, like, the unique leverage he's able to have because of his size to be like the anchor of the tush push. I know that he's talked about it on his podcast with Travis. The Eagles have the best 3rd and 1 conversion percentage, the best 4th and 1 conversion percentage. I think it's more than 10 touchdowns Jalen Hurts has had this year have come on tush pushes. I was thinking about that Eagles team, and I don't think Jalen Hurts is the most valuable player to that team. I think it's a combination of the offensive line, A.J. Brown, and even some of the defensive players that they have. I don't know if there is like one player that stands above them all. But if I had to pick one, like, I'm really interested in seeing what the tush push looks like if Jason Kelce isn't snapping the ball. And like, if it is a different player and that whole function is just changed. There is maybe a grain of sand in those gears, and maybe it uproots a lot of those things. But I don't know. I guess I was trying to fit an Eagles player into it. I think he's one of the, if not the most valuable player on that team. But then you could also go ahead and say A.J. Brown or some of those other non-quarterbacks. But I tried to get fun with it and go Jason Kelce.
I like the idea. I like the thought, and I do agree. And I've even seen Mitchell Schwartz on Twitter talking about how Lane Johnson might be the best pass protecting right tackle in the NFL, but he thinks that Jason Kelce is the most valuable player to that Eagles offensive line because of that, because it's such a valuable play and such a high leverage play, and so successful. And a lot of people want to say, oh, it's because Jalen Hurts squats 600 pounds. Jalen Hurts himself has said, like, he's airborne for a vast majority of the play. He's not digging.
I never understood the 600 pounds thing. Like, he's not squatting anybody on that play. I don't understand.
Like, he's good at it. There is a skill to QB sneaks, as you've seen when you watch certain quarterbacks around the league attempt it and others attempt it as well. Like, there is a technique to it, but it's vastly on the offensive line. And I do think he's a huge reason for it. His ability to create that immediate leverage, that almost forklift right in the middle where he's underneath everyone else and he's lifted and push him. And then you have, 700 pounds to your left, because it almost ends up always going left with that offensive line, and Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata, who both go 350 plus. That it's just very difficult to stop. But he is kind of the wedge that then everything works.
And I do think that there's push qualities to the tush push, and that, like, the players behind Jalen Hurts are often pushing him. But if anything, it's a tush ride, because he's essentially jumping on top of Jason Kelce and the other offensive linemen, and they're like bear crawling him forward, and he's, like you're saying, riding to get the first down and not necessarily lifting anybody. And, like, Jason Kelce is, like, uniquely athletic, uniquely short for that position, and I feel like his leverage on that stuff is why. There was a lot of articles written towards, like, the halfway point of the year about, like, why other teams are not as successful at the tush push. And I think some people were writing that, like, they don't have Jalen Hurts. Honestly, it's like they don't have Jason Kelce. Like, they don't have a center that is capable of getting that low and being that forklift at the center of the offensive line.
I agree, 100%.
I don't know if they're going to start calling it tush ride or not, though. I think that's a branding.
Yeah, that one. You might have to slap a disclaimer on that if you go. All right. My number 3, and I went a little bit different than maybe the obvious choices, but I went with Brandon Aiyuk, wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. If you go look at any, PFF charts separation now, I know reception, perception, Matt Harmon charts, wide receiver separation and success by route. You go look at any of those metrics, Brandon Aiyuk is number 1 in the NFL in all of them. He watches tape, he gets open at will in that offense. And, everyone's talking about Tyreek Hill and his yards per route run, 4.15 this season. Insane, early, outrageous number. Brandon Aiyuk second in the NFL. Now, he's 9th in receiving yards, but his 3.12 figure is one of the best all-time that PFF's ever charted. It's going to be top 5 all-time if he finishes at that. So he has been having an outlandish season in his own right. And then his yards per target is 13.7 on the year. Every time he's been targeted is 13.7 yards. Over the past decade, the second best figure of anyone who's gone over 1,000 yards is only 12.5 yards per target. So his efficiency metrics are off the charts this year. If Tyreek Hill wasn't having the season he's having, a lot more talk would be about Brandon Aiyuk and how dominant he's been as a number 1 type of wide receiver, and how much that he opens up all those yak opportunities for everyone else, because he's running those downfield routes and everyone has to pay attention to him. You have to put a safety over the top of him, because no one I've seen on tape has been able to guard him one-on-one. So, yeah, 56 catches, 1,053 yards doesn't sound amazing on paper, but you dive a little deeper, you watch the tape, and you realize this guy is what's kind of making it all go. Not necessarily making it all go. Everyone's nasty there in San Francisco. But it's really, if they didn't have him, that offense would not have the yak opportunities, would not have the easy layups that we've seen Brock Purdy get. Nowhere near as many if he wasn't in that offense.
Brandon Aiyuk is number 2 on my list, brother.
There we go.
Aiyuk, so the data point I love is that he leads the team in EPA on targets. A lot of that is because he's played more games than Deebo Samuel, and Deebo Samuel has been a big part of, like, some of their big explosive plays. But even if you go to, and this is credit to Benjamin Solak, who did a Brock Purdy breakdown on the Ringer YouTube channel this week, going to that Deebo Samuel touchdown, that play is designed to get the ball to Brandon Aiyuk. And if you watch the 49ers offense, so much of the offense is we got to get the ball to Brandon Aiyuk. And he, I think, is immediately, or not immediately, but this season really shown that he's one of the top, I'd say 10 or even 8 receivers in the league. I honestly feel that he is too low. You think too low?
I would three. Yeah. I think it's him, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams.
Over Jamar Chase?
No, not Devontae Adams. Him, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill. Excuse me. Okay. I was thinking Devontae Adams because he reminds me a lot of prime Devontae Adams. Is why I was like,
yeah.
Just the way they run routes.
And wherever you want to put him, maybe it's 6. Maybe that's the low end. It's 6 after Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. Insert CeeDee Lamb. I think he's in the CeeDee Lamb conversation, right? Like people need to talk about Brandon Aiyuk as they're talking about CeeDee Lamb in Dallas. So I think CeeDee Lamb this year, I mentioned that EPA on targets. I think he's up there with the best in the NFL, or right behind Tyreek Hill in terms of total like cumulative drop. Yeah, he's right behind Tyreek Hill in total EPA on those targets. I think that like Aiyuk is a CeeDee Lamb type of player, if not better. And I thought we felt that way like right immediately this season. Like I remember week 2, week 3, I'm like, holy shit, he's the best receiver on the team now. Like I think Deebo Samuel's an extremely unique player, and maybe if you want to say like best talent, maybe Deebo Samuel's more talented, whatever. Like I don't know. Like I think Brandon Aiyuk is the best like receiver in terms of able to get open at all levels of the field and can win even down just with his yak ability, but actually downfield, the hands, all that stuff. I really do think that I'm happy that you're calling out he could be the MVP because I think he is the most valuable player, has been the most valuable player for the San Francisco 49ers this season.
Yes, 100% agree. Yeah, and it like the 49ers obviously have a lot of top end talent, right? Like Fred Warner, elite. Nick Bosa, elite. Christian McCaffrey, elite. But like
Trent Williams, Urge Kittle, Deebo Samuel. It's just a state roster, which goes back to the Brock Purdy pay thing. Like,
yeah,
they can't have this raw. Like Brandon Aiyuk is up to not on a contract year, but he's got the 5th-year option. But like you're going to have to pay him soon, and I think they're going to be able to because they still have Brock Purdy on this top control contract. I think yes.
We'll get back to AG in just a second, but first, today's podcast brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you hire for small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has tools to find and help the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which can help make it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have so many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature to help you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and even quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, my number 2. And to me, this guy is still wildly underrated. He's still maybe the most underrated player in the NFL because what he's doing is unlike anything we've seen in the modern NFL. And it's Dexter Lawrence, the New York Giants defensive tackle.
Wow.
He is so far and away the best nose tackle in recent NFL history. And honestly, like truthfully, since like passing game has exploded, 03 when they got rid of the illegal contact rules and the passing game exploded. Since then, there has not been a nose tackle that's been able to affect the passer the way Dexter Lawrence has. He collapsed, and the Giants' defense, objectively, from a talent perspective, stinks this year. They are not good. He is the reason why Kayvon Thibodeau has like 12 sacks this year. Kayvon Thibodeau's not winning 1-on-1. He's just getting Dexter Lawrence pushing the center back on every single play, forcing QBs outside the pocket, and Kayvon Thibodeau's just walking in sacks left and right. Because he has 59 pressures, and he is lining up at the A-gap on 80% of his snaps this year. So if you were to compare him to other nose tackles, other guys who play in the A-gap, if anyone who's even played in the A-gap on a quarter of their snaps this season, the next closest, so Lawrence has 59, the next closest is 28. He has been twice as impactful as the next best nose tackle, and that's just a guy who's played a quarter of his snaps there. Of anyone who's played half their snaps there, so a guy who's probably a true nose tackle. Mm-hmm. The next closest is 19. Wow, they're supposed to be able to do what Dexter Lawrence is doing right now. And it's a travesty that they haven't been able to surround him with more talent on that Giants roster. But he is single-handedly the most impactful defensive player right now in the NFL. What he can do with the run, what he can do as a pass rusher. And it's just getting wasted. Because if you had anyone else that could win there in that front four consistently, that front four is one of the best front fours in the NFL. And it's still pretty darn good. It still impacts a lot of games. But
Dexter Lawrence is just outlandish what he's capable of doing. I mean, he who was the center earlier this year that he just like literally violently rushed. Tore his it dislocated his kneecap, dude. He dislocated his kneecap just because he couldn't hold up to Dexter Lawrence's strength. He is at a different level right
now. It's a very fun and cute way to talk about how much Dexter Lawrence has been good this year, but he's not the MVP. The Giants suck. I mean, you can't give the MVP to a player who's like ass on a bad team like that. You're just going completely against what MVP means at all.
No, I'm saying he's brought the most value. That was the whole point of the exercise, was to try to give credit to the guys who are actually bringing the most value, regardless of if their team's winning.
It just screams like, this whole exercise in general. It's like the NFL needs a way beyond the All-Pro team. I'm not even going to mention the Pro Bowl. Like, that's just a joke and all. But, like, beyond the All-Pro team, a way to say, like, this is the best X player, at this position, or best player in X position. Like, there are not enough.
Like college football awards? Like the the Outland.
They have the Remington for best center in college football. And they have a ton of awards. They have a bunch of awards. Because, like, football is unique to basketball in that, like, there are, obviously I know there are positions in basketball, but there's like way more specific like roles and positions in the NFL. Like, I think Dexter Lawrence should win something for best whatever, whether you want to do a nose tackle award, you want to do just defensive tackle award, like that would be sick. He'll never win MVP. And there's also it's a very difficult thing for him to even win defensive player of the year because that award's often given to edge defenders because they have more opportunities. Kayvon Thibodeau on paper, had more, as opposed to an average voter, voter, it's like him and Thibodeau's made more of an impact. He's got more sacks. It's like, that's ridiculous. Like, that should not be what it is. But, like, I don't know. Like,
get back to the rest of the AG interview in just 1 second. But first, today's pod is brought to you by BetterHelp. Whether or not your family gives gifts during the holidays, you get to define how you give to yourself. And the holidays are a great time to do that. So whether it's by starting therapy, going easier on yourself during the tough moments, or treating yourself to a day of complete rest, remember to give yourself some love this holiday season. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. In the season of giving, give yourself what you need now with BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNFL today for 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/LOCKEDON. Get 10% off your first month.
Can I have an aside here about like award voting and how we still, it's 2023 and we're still saying to the average voter, like that the average voter is still just looking at stats. Like that the average voter still doesn't watch games. Like the access to tape has never been easier. You can rewatch every single game. And like at the collegiate level, I get kind of. There's a lot of games to have to watch. But you can at least like attempt to go beyond listing out the guy's box score stats to try to figure out how good he is. And we still don't. There's still like sports writers still are just like, he had more sacks, he was better. And it's like, we have to do better. This is
I think it. Yeah.
You deserve better. Like the players deserve a little more effort from you as a sports writer. They just do.
I do feel like that problem is also twofold, right? I think one of them is maybe players not watching the games, right? Maybe or not players, writers not watching all the games and like forming their own opinions based on how they're playing and instead maybe relying or over-relying on box score stats. I think the other problem, specifically now that we're bringing up both MVP and defensive player of the year, is that the criteria is flawed. Like MVP is essentially become the best quarterback on the best team. And that's why we're even doing this exercise in the first place. It's like, who's the best quarterback on the best team? That's why Brock Purdy was a favorite at one point. Even though like he's not even the best player on his own team, he is technically the best quarterback on one of the best teams in the NFL. And that's why, Jalen Hurts was a part of the conversation for so long. It's why Tyreek Hill, after the Dolphins lost, and we all saw when he left the game, they sucked. And when he came back, they were a lot better. We all saw the importance he was to that team. They lost the game, so his odds in terms of his ability to win MVP completely tanked because they lose that game, even as good as he was and all that stuff. So there's problems with that. With Defensive Player of the Year, I think J.J. Watt, one of the years he won it, is the only player over the last 15 years that won Defensive Player of the Year and missed the playoffs. Like, it's essentially a award like you have to make the playoffs,
Still got it,
and you have to have a ton of box score stats. I'm a Raiders fan, and maybe this is biased. Max Crosby literally is like a sack and a half from the NFL lead. And I think he leads the NFL by far in tackles for loss. And he's not even top 8 in playoff odds or in defensive player of the year. Not because he's not a very valuable defensive player. And like we've seen time and time again, him be one of the best defensive players in the league. It's because his team will make the playoffs, which is freaking stupid. Like that's not what the award should be. It's like, who's the best defensive player in the league? Now, Khalil Mack leads the league in sacks. And I'm not saying he's the defensive player of the year, but like he won't even be in the conversation because the Chargers aren't going to make the playoffs. Like this is literally like, if the Chargers were like making the playoffs, like he's probably got better odds, which is just, I don't know. I think that how do we redefine the criteria for the award? Because like, I think that's ridiculous. I think that imagine the Browns missing the playoffs and that's why Myles Garrett doesn't get it. And they give it to like TJ Watt instead or whatever. Like that just makes no sense to me. They've had 3 quarterback injuries this year. And Myles Garrett misses out because he wasn't able to single-handedly overcome Joe Flacco, P.J. Walker, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson to bring the Browns to the playoffs. I don't know. I just think that.
The crazy thing about it is it's not even the bias of saying, oh, this team's better, so he is making more. He must be making more of an impact. They're actually actively just picking against just saying, no, you didn't make the playoffs, you can't win this award sort of thing. That's like an actual criteria for them. That's a team aspect that you really is, somewhat in your control, but really not when you're one guy, especially on the defense side of the ball, very much out of your control. That a team aspect can keep you out of an award running is outlandish. Like you're actually holding that criteria has value to you. For an individual player award. That's gross. And if you vote that way, you should have your vote stripped. I don't even think it's a debate.
Yeah, we need to start stripping voters. We're stripping voters. When are we starting to strip? Where's the stripping process? There needs to be is there any sports league that has figured this out? Are there other?
It actually votes well.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I don't know.
Now,
I think baseball is close because they're probably just going off of pure analytics. There's a freaking stat that gets spit out more. But baseball writers just look at that and they just go down the line for that. Probably now. Defensive metrics. They just go down the line for close, probably.
And I'm stealing this idea from Danny Heifetz. But I do think that just having more awards would help this out a lot. Because there's only not with how few awards we have.
What would be a good so gold gloves? You have gold gloves and silver sluggers in baseball, right? That has each position gets their own. Basically, you're the best hitter there. You're the best defender there. What can we do for football? How do we
best O line? Best O line, I think would be sick, and like it'd be a huge opportunity to give the Eagles their praise and or the Lions their praise without having to like talk about is their quarterback the best in the league or whatever. I think that best receiving core would be sick, and you're able to like just bring up the San Francisco 49ers. And I bet you if there was an award that was best, like, supporting cast or, like, say, like, whatever, best receiving core, no one's even talking about Brock Purdy as MVP because everyone's going to be like, no, we'll just give them the best receiving core award. And that'll be a way to honor how good this team has been. And no one will be arguing about it. But because there's no actual other tangible way to like give credit or throw flowers at how good this 49ers offense has been outside of giving Brock Purdy MVP, because now offensive player of the year has become essentially who's the best non-quarterback in the league. That's why this whole conversation happens, right? Whereas MVP could then actually become who's the best quarterback in the league. And you could give best O-line, best receiving core, maybe best D-line, best secondary. I think that rather than comeback player of the year, I think that should be rebranded to most improved player, because comeback player of the year is essentially like who almost died last year and is still playing. Like that's literally what happened with Lamar Jackson. And the number 2 favorite is Tua Tagovailoa, who's a concussion away from maybe never ever playing the game again. Like you can't have an award in one of the most violent games ever be like, hey, he's still playing. Purple Heart. When you get a Purple Heart, you're discharged from the Army. Like, at least there's no comeback player of the year there. You're like, hey, no, you're good. You got hurt in battle and you're done. And you need 2 more tours. Tomorrow, you got hurt last year, and the fact that you came back, we're giving you an award. Thank you for that. Thank you for your service, for returning to this game that we love. I don't know. I get fired up about the Comeback Player of the Year award. Because, like, remember when they gave it to Alex Smith? It's like, dude, thanks for, like, legitimately sacrificing your ability to walk forever and then playing the game again. We really appreciate you. And
exactly.
Here's the award.
Hey, you got absolutely creamed, but not hard enough that you couldn't play ever again, but just hard enough that you were trash when you did come back.
Exactly. Now, like, Geno Smith winning it last year was cool. It's like, hey, you came back from not being as good of a player, and, like, you had to, like, really work. But, like, honestly, Geno Smith, it probably would be better described as, like, a most improved player award. Like, that's what he was. Like, he was, like, the league's most improved player by a massive margin. If that award got rebranded to most improved player, we don't have to have this, like, kind of nasty conversation about Damar Hamlin and him being the Comeback Player of the Year this year, or Tua Tagovailoa existing from last year being, like, someone who, like, has some of the most hard to watch film last year because of the fencing position stuff. Like, come on. Like, anyway, I don't know. You're getting me fired up. But
instead of these awards that make, like, sense to actually honor good performances, what we got last year was we got the next gen stats moment of the year. Just versus the Bills. We got the Bud Light Celly of the year, which was probably penalized. The Bengals roller coaster celebration week 18. We got the Head and Shoulders Never Not Working Protection Play of the Year, which was George Kittle against the Cowboys. Don't even know what that was. And the NFL Fan of the Year presented by Captain Morgan, which was Larry Bevins for the Seahawks. We got just awards that no one can give an absolute damn about, dude.
All those two just having, like, a nice cheeky sponsor. That's all the NFL cares about. It's like, oh, what if we did some stupid Bud Light Silly award rather than, like, actually trying to, like, promote the players that are really, really good and make the game, like, fun to watch. I don't know. It's the best celebration of the year this year was when Tyreek Hill did that backflip with the phone. But did you see that player who had the phone got fired and, like, all that? Like, anyway, the NFL just can't get out of its own way with some of that stuff.
All right, number one, it's Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek.
He's on pace. Just to put some context. He's on pace for 2,016 yards still. You obviously saw what happened when he got hurt this past weekend against Titans. Offense kind of went in the tank. So his 4.15 yards per route is over a yard more than Brandon Aiyuk. It's over a half yard more than the previous record that since PFF started collecting in 2006, which was Steve Smith back in, I think, like 2009 or something like that. Justin Jefferson, when he went for over 1,800 yards last year, averaged 2.62 yards per route, which is out of this world. When Calvin Johnson went for 1,964, Calvin averaged 2.55. So Tyreek's on a different planet right now, and honestly has been since 2018. So hopefully,
no, I got no arguments, man. It's like, it's the route run differences are crazy. I think there's a chance he beats the 2,000 number in 16 games. Doesn't even need the 17th game. Like, there's a legitimate chance he does that. And even just speaking to his presence on the field, like, you saw a glimpse of what it looks like when they don't have Tyreek Hill, and, like, when the offense is Jalen Waddle, Braxton Berrios, and, like, a combination of, Chase Claypool and, whoever they're able to put out there versus Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and then pushing those other receivers down the line, it's just a totally different ballgame. And he's the best receiver in the league. He has been for some time. Like, he's, like, legitimately, if you could pick a receiver for a game, you ask 100 fans, 100 of them are saying Tyreek Hill. I'd be surprised if anyone said different. Like, you're an idiot if you do. Like,
who's the Burke? What's his name? Who's the ESPN? Brian Burke. Remember his thing where he said, if you ask the NFL GMs, I don't think they draft him as a top 10 wide receiver to try to defend.
No, I don't remember that.
It was insane.
I don't want to agree that's real. I don't want to agree.
He just had he had the Aaron Donald's bad at run defense take, and then the Tyreek Hill.
Oh, that's right.
Wouldn't be a top 10.
Listen, you cannot speak to the public and say that if GMs are doing a draft that Tyreek Hill would be drafted by the top 10. I think it'd be hard to find a GM that doesn't pick him either top two. Yeah. You put a second receiver ahead of Tyreek Hill, you're not watching the game. You're legitimately not watching the game. That's rough. Other stuff I want to hit on. I know I like to use these at the end here, but you saw Roger Goodell talking about banning the tush push, the hip drop tackle. Any takes on some of that stuff that's come out? Any qualms?
Hip drop tackle is just like, what do smaller defenders do against tight ends, right? Is I think the biggest thing I wonder about. You have a 85-pound corner going against a 260-pound tight end. they have to use their body weight to bring that guy down. If you don't like square him up originally, if you're off to the side, you're coming in, if you're behind them, you have to. There's no other way to bring, like, it's like, how do you ever seen someone rope a calf? You hip drop a calf, use your whole body weight to try to get them down because they're so much heavier than you. So it's going to lead to more points, but it's also going to be like damn near impossible to.
I mean, I think the problem. Yeah, I think the problem I have is like the enforcement piece of it. Like trying to enforce that's going to be such a grind. I think
it's not like the horse collar was probably the last thing taken out in that regard. That was but that has an easy. You regret
so easy. Yeah.
Is he in there or is he not? It's like a face mask. There's an obvious hip drop is kind of, there's a massive gray area, and it's there. And you don't love gray areas, right? When it comes to refs being able to decide outcomes of games.
The league the refs are already struggling with so much of the gray area. Defensive pass interference is somehow a gray area for the refs currently. What do you think of the Kadarius Toney offensive offside? People fired up. Yeah, I saw Bill Simmons said he lost a little respect for Jeff Mahomes. I don't know if you saw that.
Dude, right? I mean, they wanted it to be like, he wants it to be like the NBA, where the refs swallow the whistle in the last like 3 minutes. And that's horrible. No one wants it to be like the NBA. That's you want it to be called consistently. And the fact that it hasn't been called consistently and that he's lined up offsides a bunch is not, in my opinion, any justification. It goes to show that they were freaking. If anyone but Andy Reid was head coach of the Chiefs right now, we'd be calling them a horribly coached team, right? They've made so many of these sort of mistakes offensively, where there's Juwan Taylor still in this week was behind the center in that play. Could have been flagged for illegal formation himself. Like, he's still doing it. 14 weeks in the season, he's still doing the thing that he's been penalized for a ton already this season. How do you not get into these guys?
My thing with both the Juwan Taylor situation and the Kadarius Toney situation, I think that the referees need to collectively group up and whoever the head referee person is, the czar, and say, hey, we need to go back to high school a little bit. And I don't know if you saw the Dan Orlovsky clip where he highlighted all the times earlier in the game that Kadarius Toney was lined up in the same position. But like, we need to tell players that they're doing something illegal when it's something super minor and procedural like that, right? I don't know if you saw that NFL mic'd up clip where the refs before the game were telling Tyreek Hill, hey man, don't throw up the peace sign during the game. Like, we'll flag it for you. He's like, come on. It's like, we're going to flag it. Like, that's what's going to happen. We don't want to because that's stupid and it makes us look stupid, but don't do it because the league doesn't want us to do it. And then, like, if Tyreek Hill does it, then it's on him, right? It's on him. They literally told you to do it. Now, for the Kadarius Toney thing, if that was happening in the, since it was happening in the beginning of the games, I would have loved to hear after that game, and the ref said, like, dude, we told him 3 or 4 times that he was doing it, and then he did it, and then we called it. That would have been cool. They probably didn't, right? Like, they probably didn't do that. And then, like, the same with the Juwan Taylor thing. You see him doing that in the first couple quarters. You could probably flag him for it, but you could also just be like, hey, man, you're lining up out of position. We're going to flag you for it. We don't want to because that makes the game harder to watch and less fun and kind of terrible, and the league doesn't want that. The fans don't want that. So let's do this. But I feel like the refs, and this has been a criticism of the refs this year, like they're playing gotcha with some of these flags, where it's like, oh, we're a part of the moment, we're a part of the thing. Like, this is a part of the game. If we're refereeing the game, it'd be so much cooler if some of this like legislation or like discipline was done quietly on the side. I don't know, especially with the procedural stuff.
My take is that if they were strict about it in the first place, guys would learn. Guys would learn very quickly.
True.
If for like 3 straight plays, and I think Juwan Taylor even earlier this year, right, he had like back-to-back plays where he got flagged for. If they were strict about it in the first place, it would go away very quickly. Guys would learn.
Yeah.
If Kadarius Toney was flagged 3 times earlier in the game, he would not be doing it in that critical situation. And that's why the biggest thing that the NFL needs to do is have a sky judge who's literally watching the tape from up in the booth, the all-22 angle, looking for a procedural penalty on both sides of the ball, counting 11 men, counting 12 men on defense, or, looking for procedural penalties, and then immediately enforcing it. So that, like, you get held, everyone's held to the same standard. There's no then being able to bitch after the game, whether it's like, oh, it didn't get called on them, got called on us, that sort of thing. It's like, no, everything gets called, And so your attention to detail, it behooves you to have guys who have good attention to detail. And I think that's the biggest thing with the Chiefs right now is not that they're necessarily, you could say it's coaching, but oftentimes guys who are like Kadarius Toney are just inconsistent. That's been his MO back to Florida. Yeah, the attention to detail is very low. And so you don't want to then employ guys who have that low attention to detail.
I agree.
When that's the case. Yeah. If you're actually enforcing letter of the law, both sides of the football, it's like the best way to go. And then that'll just feel the best for everyone, and it'll feel best for gamblers too, right? They won't feel like it's rigged if everything that is actually supposed to be called gets called.
I think a sky judge, similar to how they do it in rugby, where they can come in and not just say like that wasn't a penalty, but also come in and say that there was a penalty. Even if that sky judge was only able to do that with specific calls, right? Like maybe a sky judge isn't able to bring up offensive holding, right? Or I don't know, like like some of that stuff that you want people calling on the field, and like where refs you want to have that judgment, whatever. But like if a sky judge was responsible for those pre-snap procedural penalties or at the snap procedural penalties, and then obviously one of the most like momentum shifting plays in the games is like defensive holding, and then also like defensive pass interference, because automatic first downs and defensive pass interference sometimes set people up on the 1 yard line for touchdowns. Like that's where I think that would help. And then like also just an increased emphasis on, hey, we're going to flag this if we see it kind of thing. Like that to me like will help reduce penalties. It'll help reduce penalties and less be like, refs aren't as involved in some of these things. I don't know. I don't know. People don't want to see this many flags. And people also don't want to see this many flags like decide games.
I agree. No, and they just want it to be fair, right? You just want to not have an excuse afterwards. You want people not, Patrick Mahomes to not even have to say, swallow the whistle at that point in time. He just wants it to be consistent throughout. And when it's not consistent throughout on either way, that's when people get upset. Hi, brother. Great talking.
All right, man.
Yeah, as always.
Talk soon.
Always great to have Austin Gayle on the show. We will be back next Monday. Until then, you've been listening to Renner Ranks, part of the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team